people familiar with the discussions. NBC News has not independently confirmed the reporting, but this comes amid increasing concerns from some Republican lawmakers over the mounting allegations concerning Hegseth's personal life. People close to the president-elect's team tell the Journal Trump allies believe Hegseth's nomination may not survive further scrutiny. As the paper notes, picking DeSantis would amount to a stunning turn for Trump, but in DeSantis, Trump has a well-known conservative with both military and executive experience who shares Trump's and Hegseth's view on eliminating the so-called woke policies from the armed forces. Joining us now, the reporter who broke the story from The Bulwark, Mark Caputo. Mark, what more can you tell us? Is this imminent? Are there any other catches that could hold this up?
Well, I was told it was a really serious conversation they've been having, and they've been having it for a while. And it's not Donald Trump's people talking to Ron DeSantis' people. It's Donald Trump talking to Ron DeSantis about it. I got to say, having covered both of these guys, having covered the Republican primary, it's really kind of hard to see this happening. But I've been assured, and was reporting it out yesterday, that no, this could really happen. It's not just that Pete Hegseth has these problems. It's that Donald Trump is serious, not just about getting the woke out of the military, is that he believes that there's a certain amount of bloat, and understandably so, and perhaps a certain amount of fat that needs to be cut from the Pentagon budget. And you're going to need someone who is able to do that and withstand the political pressure. And there's one thing, whether you dislike Ron DeSantis or you like Ron DeSantis, that most people agree on, is that DeSantis is very stubborn, and when he sets his mind to doing something, he does it, and he doesn't care about who howls. So if, and it's still an if, and perhaps a big if, Ron DeSantis is appointed to be the DOD secretary, the defense secretary, yeah, he's going to pursue these social policies, but there is a strong possibility, I'm being told, that he'll actually try to really cut some of that Pentagon budget, which has a lot of profligate spending in it.
You know, Jonathan O'Meara, you've reported on Donald Trump for a very long time, and understand. These stories started coming out about his about Hegseth's drinking problems, and we've heard it over and over again. And in fact, we had heard, there's an NBC report talking about how numerous people inside of Fox News say that he still has a drinking problem. He still shows up drunk. He still shows up smelling of alcohol. We had actually heard that from, our team had heard that from a source inside of Fox News, a reliable source inside of Fox News last week. That, they're saying you don't have to talk about 2018. This is still happening. And that was a real concern that people inside the Trump transition had also been hearing. So I'd heard last week, and I know you had too, from my sources inside the Senate, that the Republicans were already going south on this guy last week. Then his mother's letter hit this weekend that actually lined up with what we've heard from so many of these accusations about his behavior and his drunkenness when he was running the two vets organizations. Now the Fox News story has come out. But again, the Fox News story that NBC's reporting is no shock to the Trump transition team. They were already hearing it from inside Fox himself. So given what Donald Trump's always said about alcohol, about his brother, about the lack of discipline, he even's written about it, hard to see how Pete Hegseth gets through this, and hard to see, especially when Lindsey Graham is saying there are a lot of concerns. One Senate insider laughingly told me, Lindsey's a lagging indicator. This was done some time ago. Talk about it.
Yeah, a few things here. First, that NBC News story that suggests that Hegseth would show up on set at Fox smelling of alcohol. One of the reporters behind that story, Courtney Kuby, joining us in a few minutes. But first of all, you're right to underline Donald Trump's distaste for alcohol. He has said repeatedly he has never drank in his life. He blames it for the death of his brother, someone he cared about deeply. He also judges harshly people who he thinks drink too much. Let's remember, Rudy Giuliani Giuliani lost a cabinet post after the 2016 election, in part because Trump saw him drinking too much. So these reports are not going to help Hegseth's case. Now, Hegseth himself, yes, Joe, I heard from Republicans yesterday as well, even as Hegseth has been making the rounds on Capitol Hill, that his nomination is in deep danger. There could be up to 6 or more Republican senators, you only need 4, who are ready to sink his nomination, including Lindsey Graham, who normally goes along with whatever Trump wants. Hegseth appearing on Fox later today for an interview, which is a sense maybe a last-ditch effort to save that nomination. But he's got an uphill climb. And Willie, if it ends up being Governor DeSantis, certainly this is a one-time rival of Trump's. But just like Marco Rubio, a one-time Florida politician rival of Trump, Trump has improved relations with DeSantis, at least somewhat. And I'm already told this morning, Republicans say like DeSantis would clear through the Republican Senate. He's got relationships on the Hill from his time in Congress. He was already been sort of publicly vetted for his runs for governor, as well as, of course, his ill-fated presidential bid. And he does not appear to have the baggage that Hegseth does.
And then opening another big position in the state of Florida. If that happens, you have the Senate with Marco Rubio. You've got the governor's office with potentially now Ron DeSantis as well. Let's get to that report that from NBC, 3 current, 7 former Fox employees telling NBC News Pete Hegseth would drink in ways that concerned his colleagues. 2 said he smelled of alcohol before going on the air as a co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend more than a dozen times. NBC News reports 3 current employees said his drinking remained a concern up until Trump announced him as his choice to run the Pentagon, at which point Hegseth left Fox. For the sake of national security, I really hope he has stopped drinking, one of the former Fox employees said. He should not be Secretary of Defense, another former Fox employee said. His drinking should be disqualifying, end quote. This follows a report from the New Yorker earlier this week that detailed accusations of impropriety and drunkenness that led to Hegseth's ouster from 2 top veterans groups nearly a decade ago. A spokesperson for the Trump transition tells NBC News these disgusting allegations are completely unfounded and false, and anyone peddling these defamatory lies to score political cheap shots is sickening. As a decorated combat veteran, Pete has never done anything to jeopardize that, and he's treating his nomination as the most important deployment of his life. Hegseth's lawyer referred NBC to the Trump team statement, and Fox News did not respond to requests for comment. Joining us now, NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Kube, one of the reporters who broke the allegations about those concerns over Pete Hegseth's drinking. So, Courtney, you have 10, I believe, sources on this story. This is not just one person leaking something out to you. Tell us more about what you found in your reporting.
Yeah, and I have to say, we worked on this, our colleagues Chloe Mellis and Sarah Fitzpatrick and I worked on this for several weeks. This wasn't the story that just came up. We spoke with more people even than are reflected in the story. And these aren't people who are out to necessarily, criticize Fox News. Consistently, we were talking to current and former Fox News employees who were concerned about Pete Hegseth's qualifications for such an enormous job at leading the Department of Defense. So, as you mentioned, Willie, 10 current and former colleagues from Fox News who told us about this pattern of behavior over the course of years, where Pete Hegseth would repeatedly show up, sometimes moments before the 6 a.m. show would start on the weekend morning, and he would talk sometimes about being hungover, about how he had barely slept or not slept at all because he'd been out all night, he'd been out partying, and oftentimes he would even come in and they could still smell the alcohol from the night before. So coming in still with some of the aftermath from his night before being out drinking. In addition to that, we also spoke with colleagues who were at social events with him, Fox News social events, where they would see him overindulging. So candidly, it was behavior that is reminiscent of that New Yorker article that you mentioned of him overindulging in alcohol at official events with colleagues, and at times behaving in ways that was embarrassing or not necessarily fitting of the leader of an organization. You guys are all on shows. You know how this goes. When the host or the anchor of a show shows up only moments before broadcast, before you go on the air, it puts a lot of stress on the staff, on the show, on the producers. And that was what we consistently heard here, was that this behavior really caused angst and concern. And yes, while we are talking for the most part about a period of several years ago before he moved to Tennessee, we did also speak with colleagues who said this continued to be a concern, his drinking, up until he terminated his contract with Fox News on November 12th, when Donald Trump, President-elect Trump, named him as his Secretary of Defense. A consistent thing that we heard throughout the course of the several weeks that we reported out this story, Willie, was the concerns about his character here. And one thing I have really been struck by was when Hegseth was first named several weeks ago, there was a lot of talk about the policies that he could come in and implement as the Secretary of Defense. We heard a lot about his feelings that women should no longer serve in combat positions. You know, what could happen potentially with transgender individuals who are serving in the military, serving openly right now. The conversation has really shifted over those weeks to concerns about his character. The drinking has been one, his treatment of women has been another. And as you mentioned, it has really been a nearly daily drip, drip, drip of additional allegations and accusations. That's why, as you were talking about, there seemed to be this increasing concern among Republican senators who candidly would usually support President-elect Trump's nominees.
All right, NBC's Courtney Kube, thank you so much.
Courtney.
Greatly appreciate it. Let's bring in Admiral Stavridis. Admiral, you know, we always talk about how two things can be true at one time. So let's walk through this for a second on a human level. Everything that we've read about Pete Hegseth and his first tours in combat zones suggests that he did a great job, honorable, and in uniform, was respected by those around him in his early tours. We also know, though, a lot of men and women come back from war zones and perhaps they have PTSD. I'm not suggesting that's the case here. I don't know what the case is here, but it is very obvious by seeing the pattern of behavior since he returned from the combat that he obviously needs help. I mean, if you even just read what his mother wrote, and I know that now she's trying to be a good mom and trying to defend her son after that's out, but what she wrote lines up with what people said before, during, and now after. So this appears to be, and I think the Trump transition team believes this appears to be a man who needs help and not the nuclear codes.
Yeah, I think we talked about that earlier in the week on exactly that point. I think there's three baskets of problems here. Number one, which we've talked about quite a bit this morning, the kind of character issues. That email from his mother is heartbreaking to read. Then there's the policy issues. I don't see how you become the Secretary of Defense of an organization that's 20% women in virtually every combat role. And by the way, I've commanded thousands of women in combat since I was a commander in the Navy, a commodore, an admiral at sea in Afghanistan. Women fight well in combat. I've seen it again and again. You can't go into the building, the Pentagon, with that kind of a stance that women should be pulled out of the force. So there's a policy basket. And then third, I think